Hey guys, thank you very much for being here tonight. Imagine Rome 2,000 years ago, its narrow streets echoing with the creak of wagons and the chatter of merchants, the air heavy with smoke from cooking fires and the faint tang of olive oil. Somewhere in that sprawling city in the heat of July 100 BCE, a child is born into the patrician Julian family. His name is Gaius Julius Caesar, though in that moment he is simply a squalling infant in a cramped, noisy household. Romans are nothing if not superstitious, and many whisper that the omens around his birth flashing comets odd tremors in the ground must surely mean the boy's destined for greatness or doom. The thing about Roman omens is they're vague enough to cover both. I bet you wouldn't dare face Julius Caesar in a dark alley, or worse, in a Senate meeting with daggers tucked under togas. That's the sort of figure he becomes, both admired and feared, a man whose life begins not in splendor, but in uncertainty. If this story brings you peace, please like and subscribe to our channel. Settle down, listen carefully, and together, let's enjoy this tender tale that will help you drift off into the most delightful, restful sleep. Share in the comments how you feel tonight, or what small worry lingers in your mind. It's good to put it down and let it go here. Maybe pull a blanket a little tighter around you. Listen to the quiet sounds of your room and prepare to drift peacefully into our tale. From his earliest days, Caesar grows up in a city obsessed with status. His family claims descent from Venus herself, yes, the goddess of love, which is one way of ensuring your family dinners never lack confidence. Still, the Julian clan isn't at the top of Rome's social ladder. They have prestige, but not the wealth to match, and Caesar's childhood is shaped by the tension between noble name and tight purse strings. The boy learns quickly that appearances matter: how you speak, how you dress, which clients you greet in the forum. Rome is basically one big stage, and every patrician child is expected to rehearse his lines. One quirky tidbit: Roman newborns weren't considered fully part of the family until 8 or 9 days after birth, when a special ceremony called the dies lustricus took place. Only then would the father pick up the baby, acknowledging it as his own. Until then, it was touch and go. So little Julius's first week was essentially a probation period. I like to imagine his mother Aurelia watching him with sharp eyes saying, "Don't you dare mess this up, little one." As he grows, Caesar's world is full of contradictions. On the one hand, Rome is the heart of civilization, with aqueducts, amphitheaters, and philosophers quoting Homer at dinner. On the other, it's a rough and tumble town, where mobs roam the streets. Politicians bribe voters with bread and circuses, and hired gangs literally beat up rivals. Think of it like a mix between a high-class Senate debate and a back-alley wrestling match. Caesar learns to navigate both. Historians still argue whether Caesar's ambition was apparent in his earliest years, or if it hardened later after he faced danger and exile. What is clear is that he absorbs from his mother a sense of iron discipline, and from his father a belief that their family deserves more. He practices rhetoric, studies law, and trains his body for military life. In Roman culture, being able to both quote poetry and throw a javelin is considered the ultimate package deal. Even as a boy, Caesar notices the constant struggle between the optimates, the traditional aristocrats who cling to Senate power, and the popularis politicians who appeal to the common people with reform and spectacle. That split will define his life. It's like growing up in a household where your parents argue every night about politics. Only imagine the arguments involve mobs, assassinations, and the occasional gladiator riot for flavor. And so the stage is set. A child born under ominous signs into a family both noble and needy in a city where every glance, gesture, and whispered rumor carries weight. Rome is restless, waiting for leaders bold enough to reshape it, and among its crowded streets, little Julius takes his first uncertain breaths. Caesar's childhood fades into the hustle of adolescence, and Rome begins to show him its full chaos. Picture him as a lanky teenager striding through the forum, the marble columns gleaming the air, a noisy mixture of vendors, hawking olives, magistrates shouting decrees and gossip swirling faster than wine at a banquet. The boy is ambitious, and ambition in Rome is like fire. It can warm you or burn you to ash. The Julian family does not drown in riches, but Aurelius Caesar's mother is sharp-eyed and fiercely protective. She ensures he learns rhetoric, a skill that would later make him one of the most dangerous speakers in history. Rome, after all, runs not on quiet efficiency, but on thunderous oratory. A speech delivered with flair could move crowds, topple rivals, and win elections. Caesar's early teachers drill him in rhythm persuasion and the art of holding an audience in the palm of his hand. If TikTok had existed in Rome, young Julius would have been the guy racking up views with snappy one-liners. At this stage, his ambition is already tied to the populares, the faction that courts the common folk. He sees that the old guard, the optimates, clutch their traditions like relics, but offer little to those struggling. Aligning with the people is risky, but Caesar senses that's where Rome's future lies. His earliest political step comes through marriage, because in Rome, wedding vows are basically campaign posters. At just 17, he marries Cornelia, the daughter of Lucius Cinna, a powerful populist leader. This is no love-struck elopement. It's a tactical alliance, a way to cement his position. The connection nearly costs him everything. When the dictator Sulla takes power, he orders young Caesar to divorce Cornelia. Refusing such a command is like refusing to pay your taxes while the IRS is standing in your kitchen. But Caesar refuses stubbornly, defiantly, almost suicidally. Sulla, enraged, strips him of his inheritance, priesthood, and titles, forcing him into hiding. At one point, soldiers drag him through mud and filth, and only a series of well-timed bribes save his life. One family friend supposedly remarked, "There are many Mariuses in that boy," hinting at Caesar's resemblance to his fiery uncle, Marius, Sulla's rival. Historians still argue whether this moment, the refusal to bow to Sulla, was pure courage or youthful arrogance. Either way, it sets a pattern. Caesar will risk everything for loyalty, whether to his family, his allies, or later his soldiers. He may bend, but he rarely breaks. A quirky tidbit, when Caesar was stripped of his priesthood, he lost not just religious duties, but also his fashionable hairstyle. As Flamen Dearlis, high priest of Jupiter, he wasn't even allowed to see an army or touch a horse. Being kicked out meant he could finally wear normal clothes, grab a sword, and live like an ambitious Roman male. In other words, exile gave him freedom. Imagine telling a teenager, "Sorry, you can't go to parties anymore. You'll have to travel the world and carry weapons instead." For Caesar, that was a blessing in disguise. During his flight from Sulla's wrath, Caesar contracts malaria in the marshy regions of the Italian countryside. Weak, bedridden, and broke, he relies on Aurelia's network and sympathetic patrons to survive. Yet even sick, he carries himself with that magnetic confidence. People whisper, this boy will either be the ruin of Rome or its savior. Romans loved dramatic predictions they couldn't resist foreshadowing. Eventually, Sulla relents. Pressured by friends, the dictator supposedly mutters that in Caesar he sees many Mariuses, and that one day this young man would be Rome's undoing. Sulla lets him live, but Caesar knows he's marked. It's like being told, "Sure, you can stay at the party, but everyone's watching you and the bouncers hate you." With Sulla's death, Caesar emerges from the shadows. He joins the army, his debts mounting, but his ambition sharper than ever. The world outside Rome calls, and Caesar prepares to leave behind the smoky streets and crumbling politics of his youth. Ahead lies blood glory, and a very strange pirate incident that will show the world just how dangerous this young aristocrat has become. Exile turns into opportunity, and Caesar finds his stride in the army. He serves in Asia Minor under Marcus Minucius Thermus, and quickly earns a reputation for boldness. At one point during the siege of Mytilene, he saves the life of a fellow soldier, earning a civic crown of oak leaves, Rome's second highest military honor. Imagine him striding back to camp with leaves on his head instead of medals on his chest. The kind of fashion accessory that said, "Yes, I personally kept Rome's empire intact today. What did you do?" But Caesar's strangest adventure comes not in battle, but at sea. Sailing across the Aegean, he is captured by Cilician pirates. Now pirates are supposed to terrify their captives into silence and obedience. But this is Julius Caesar. Instead of cowering, he treats the pirates like unruly house guests. When they demand 20 talents of silver for his ransom, Caesar laughs in their faces and insists they should ask for 50. To them, it's like their hostage just tried to upsell his own kidnapping. For 38 days, Caesar lives among them. He writes poetry and speeches, reads them aloud, and if the pirates fail to applaud enthusiastically, he scolds them for their poor taste. He joins in their games' exercises and meals, but always with a curious superiority. He tells them repeatedly, almost casually, that when he's freed, he will come back and crucify the lot of them. They laugh, assuming it's a joke. Spoiler, it isn't. One quirky tidbit, Caesar actually shushed the pirates when he wanted to nap. Imagine a 20-something aristocrat napping peacefully while armed sea bandits tiptoe around afraid to wake him. It's equal parts absurd and terrifying, which pretty much sums up Caesar's personality. The ransom eventually arrives and Caesar is released. Most men would sail home relieved. Caesar instead raises a small fleet, hunts the pirates down, and captures them. He keeps his word, ordering their crucifixion. But in a strange gesture of mercy, or maybe flair, he has their throats cut first to spare them unnecessary suffering. To the Romans, this balance of brutality and compassion makes him magnetic ruthless, but never without style. Historians still argue whether Caesar's pirate episode is exaggerated by ancient writers polished into legend to showcase his charisma. Did he really nap while pirates tiptoed? Did he really correct their applause? Hard to say. But the story reveals something undeniable: Caesar projects dominance even when powerless. To him, captivity is just another stage to perform on. Returning to Rome, Caesar carries the aura of a man touched by destiny. His debts are heavy, but he is building something more valuable than money: his reputation. In Roman politics, honor and notoriety are currency. A young aristocrat who defies Sulla, survives pirates, and wins laurels in battle is someone to watch. Caesar next dives deeper into the courts. He becomes known as a fiery prosecutor, taking on corrupt governors. His speeches are sharp, theatrical, and biting. Rome's courts are public spectacles, with audiences cheering and jeering, and Caesar thrives in the performance. If gladiators fought with swords, orators like Caesar fought with words. One surviving anecdote says he even practiced speaking against the roar of rushing water, so his voice could carry in the din of the forum. Imagine the neighbors' complaints. There's that Julian boy again yelling at the fountain for hours. Yet behind the showmanship, debts pile higher. Politics in Rome requires constant bribes, games, and favors. Caesar borrows money shamelessly, relying on wealthy allies like Crassus, one of Rome's richest men, who bankrolls his ambitions in exchange for political loyalty. Caesar himself jokes that he needs money not for luxury, but to sustain his ladder climbing in Roman politics. By the end of his 20s, Caesar is no longer just an ambitious aristocrat, he's a name. The pirate tale spreads, his court performances attract notice, and his debts link him to Rome's most powerful financiers. He is still far from the absolute power he craves, but Rome is beginning to whisper. Julius Caesar is dangerous, entertaining, and destined for something greater. The boy of omens has grown into a man with stories already larger than life, and Rome hasn't even seen him on a battlefield yet. Caesar's ambition now turns toward the place where Roman reputations are truly forged, the battlefield. The courts and speeches win applause, but military triumphs make legacies. He begins with smaller commands, but his real transformation happens in Gaul, a sprawling territory stretching from modern France into Belgium, parts of Switzerland and beyond. For most Romans, Gaul is wild land filled with fierce tribes, strange customs, and warriors who paint themselves for battle. For Caesar, it is a blank canvas, and he is about to paint it in blood, strategy, and charisma. When he first arrives, he is not yet Rome's unchallenged star. The Senate appoints him governor of Cisalpine Gaul and Illyricum, with the unexpected addition of Transalpine Gaul. On paper, it looks like a consolation prize. In reality, it's like handing him a loaded crossbow. These provinces give him direct command over legions, territory to expand, and opportunities to enrich himself. Caesar, already drowning in debt, sees Gaul not only as a chance for glory, but as the perfect ATM with swords. The Gallic tribes are no pushovers. Fierce, mobile, and proud, they know the land far better than any Roman. But Caesar's genius lies in organization and adaptability. He writes in his commentaries on the Gallic War, his own propaganda, of course, that he fights not just with brute force, but with cunning. He builds bridges across mighty rivers in days, constructs fortifications that leave enemies stunned, and uses diplomacy as deftly as swords. If an enemy tribe won't ally with him, he crushes them, and then writes about it in the third person. There's something darkly hilarious about reading Caesar's accounts of himself. Caesar advanced bravely. Caesar triumphed magnificently. Talk about giving yourself a 5-star Yelp review. One quirky tidbit. Caesar once had his men build an entire bridge across the Rhine, not because he needed it, but to show Germanic tribes he could. It was less a military necessity and more a flex of engineering dominance. After a few weeks of marching around on the far side, he dismantled it, essentially saying, "Just so you know, I can walk into your backyard anytime." Imagine a neighbor building a ladder into your yard just to wave, then taking it back home. The legions adore him. He eats their rations, marches beside them, and endures their hardships. When they mutiny over lack of pay or exhaustion, he doesn't punish them harshly. Instead, he jokes with them, flatters their pride, and then dares them to leave him. Of course, they never do. His soldiers call themselves Caesar's men with pride. This bond general and legion as family becomes the backbone of his rise. Historians still argue whether Caesar's charisma was natural or carefully cultivated, but the results speak for themselves. Few generals in history command such devotion. In Gaul, Caesar meets enemies who will test him. Ariovistus, the Germanic king, whose massive warriors terrify Roman senators. The Helvetii, who migrate with entire families in vast wagons. And later, the formidable Vercingetorix, who unites tribes against Rome. Each campaign is brutal, but each adds to Caesar's legend. Rome hears of battles where entire tribes vanish, where Caesar wins against overwhelming odds, and where rivers run red. Citizens at home cheer, though some senators grow uneasy at the thought of a man commanding an army more loyal to him than to the Republic. Caesar is not merely conquering land, he is conquering minds. His commentaries, written during the campaigns, are sent back to Rome, read aloud in public squares, and devoured like the latest bestseller. They present him as both hero and humble servant of Rome. Of course, he glosses over failures and magnifies victories. Imagine a politician running his own PR blog while actively fighting wars. That's Caesar, equal parts general and influencer. And wealth pours in. Spoils from Gaul repay his debts many times over fund more games and feasts in Rome and secure allies in the Senate. Suddenly the boy, once stripped of everything by Sulla, is the most powerful man beyond Rome's walls. Yet even in the glory of Gaul, shadows gather. Caesar's rivals, particularly Pompey the Great, watch nervously. What began as cooperation between them is souring. Rome is big enough for powerful men, but not for two, with armies at their back. For now, Caesar keeps fighting, keeps winning, and keeps writing. But the Rubicon waits ahead, a shallow stream that will become the deepest divide in Roman history. The victories in Gaul swell Caesar's fame, but back in Rome, the political stage is cracking. Senators mutter that no man should wield such loyalty from legions, such wealth from conquest, or such adoration from the crowd. Yet Caesar knows how to spin a story. Every parchment of his commentaries sent back from Gaul is like a modern news feed. His face, his name, his triumphs everywhere. Rome's citizens love him, but the Senate trembles. It is against this backdrop that Caesar makes his most fateful decision to march on Rome itself. The law requires him to give up his command when his governorship ends, but Caesar fears that if he returns to Rome as a private citizen, his enemies will prosecute him, strip his honors, maybe even exile him. To Caesar, surrender is not an option. At the Rubicon River in 49 BCE, he pauses with his army. The Rubicon is not a mighty torrent, but its legal significance is enormous. Crossing it with legions means declaring war on the Senate, on Pompey, on the Republic itself. Ancient writers love to dramatize this moment, Caesar hesitating, weighing destiny, then uttering the famous phrase, alea iacta, as the die is cast. In other words, no turning back. Picture the scene, a cold dawn mist clinging to the shallow water, his soldiers tense but loyal Rome, just a few days' march away. One quirky tidbit, some sources say Caesar first joked with his men, tossing dice like in a tavern, before delivering the line. If true, it's the ultimate example of gallows humor gambling Rome's future with the same levity as a board game. Historians still argue whether Caesar truly said the line, or if later writers embroidered it for dramatic effect. But the result is undeniable. Once he steps into the stream, the Republic changes forever. The Senate panics. Pompey, once Caesar's ally through marriage, he had wed Julia. Caesar's daughter flees with his supporters. Rome itself falls into chaos. Citizens pack their belongings, senators scatter, and Caesar marches triumphantly into an almost deserted capital. He doesn't seize the city in bloodshed, but in eerie silence. Caesar's soldiers chant proud to be part of history. They had fought with him in Gaul, starved with him, bled with him. Now they cross into Rome itself as conquerors. The bond between general and army is so strong that men follow him without hesitation, even knowing this act makes them traitors in the eyes of the old Republic. The march south becomes a rolling tide. Towns and garrisons open their gates to him. Those who resist are brushed aside. Caesar, keen to appear merciful, offers clemency to many enemies, welcoming them back if they submit. It is a calculated kindness. By showing mercy where others might slaughter, he both weakens resistance and wins admiration. A quirky cultural note. Roman soldiers on this march reportedly sang bawdy songs about their general mocking his alleged affairs with noble women. It might sound disrespectful, but in Roman military culture, crude jokes were proof of loyalty. If soldiers sang about you, it meant they loved you. It's like today's soldiers making memes of their commanders irreverent but affectionate. As Caesar presses forward, Pompey retreats further. The once great partnership, the so-called first triumvirate of Caesar-Pompey, and Crassus is shattered. Crassus has already died fighting in the east, leaving only 2 titans. Now the stage is set for civil war, not between factions of senators, but between 2 men with legions at their backs. Rome is no stranger to civil strife, but this feels different. This is not a quarrel of laws. This is the Republic tearing itself in two. And at the center of it stands Caesar, the man who dared to step into a river and gamble an empire. Civil war spreads across the Mediterranean like wildfire. Caesar's swift and decisive races south, determined to corner Pompey before his rival can regroup. Pompey, however, is no ordinary opponent. Once Rome's golden boy, hailed as Magnus the Great, he commands loyalty from senators and still holds the Senate's official backing. Caesar has daring and speed, but Pompey has legitimacy and numbers. The question is not whether Rome will bleed, but how much. At first, the balance tilts toward Pompey. With the Senate's support, he controls the seas, cutting Caesar off from grain shipments from Africa. He gathers vast resources, while Caesar, always strapped for cash, must rely on loans, captured treasuries, and the iron devotion of his men. Yet Caesar compensates with astonishing energy. He moves faster than Pompey expects, seizing towns and fortresses in rapid succession. The two finally clash in Greece. Caesar crosses the Adriatic with limited ships, leaving many legions stranded. His gamble nearly ruins him. Pompey's navy dominates the waters, and for weeks Caesar is cut off, desperate, gnawing at dwindling supplies. His men joke grimly about eating roots and drinking foul water. Yet they never desert. One quirky tidbit: when Caesar's men complain of hunger, he sometimes eats wild herbs alongside them, pretending they are delicacies, then teases them for lacking refinement. You think this is bitter? Clearly you've never tasted true Roman cooking. Gallows humor, but effective. Historians still argue whether Pompey squandered his advantage here. With superior forces, he could have crushed Caesar outright. Instead, he hesitated, allowing Caesar's stranded troops to reunite. Perhaps Pompey feared the morale of Caesar's veterans, or perhaps he simply miscalculated. Either way, his caution gives Caesar the opening he needs. The climactic battle comes at Pharsalus in 48 BCE. Caesar, heavily outnumbered, lines his men with unshakable calm. His veterans know his signals by heart. They trust his instincts. Pompey's cavalry charges, expecting to overwhelm Caesar's flank. But Caesar anticipates this. He plants a hidden reserve of infantry who spring forward, spears bristling, breaking the momentum of Pompey's horsemen. Chaos ripples through Pompey's ranks. In moments, numerical superiority turns into a rout. Pompey flees. The great Magnus, conqueror of the East, protector of the Republic, abandons his camp. Caesar walks through Pompey's deserted tent, marveling at the luxury silver dishes, rich fabrics, delicacies untouched. He shakes his head, remarking to his men, "Here we find the banquet, not the battle." It is a sharp contrast. Pompey feasting in abundance, Caesar winning through hunger and grit. One quirky anecdote says that Caesar, after victory, forbids celebrations of Pompey's death. Though rivals, Pompey was once his son-in-law and ally. Caesar's clemency is as much strategy as sentiment. By honoring his enemies, he hopes to win their supporters. Pompey, meanwhile, flees to Egypt, believing it's young King Ptolemy Thene. will offer sanctuary. Instead, he meets betrayal. As he steps ashore, assassins strike him down, presenting his severed head to Caesar when he arrives days later. Imagine the horror Caesar, hardened by war, recoils at the sight. Far from gloating, he weeps. Even for a man so ambitious, the murder of Pompey feels like a desecration of Rome's dignity. He orders proper rites for his old rival. The civil war, however, is far from over. Though Pompey is dead, resistance lingers. Senators scatter to Africa and Spain, plotting new campaigns. But for now, Caesar stands triumphant. He is master of Rome's destiny. His legions undefeated, his enemies in disarray. The boy born under ominous signs has become the most powerful man alive, and yet the greatest tests of love, politics, and betrayal still lie ahead. With Pompey gone, Caesar strides into Rome as the undisputed victor of civil war, yet not officially king. The Senate, bruised and humiliated, has little choice but to appoint him dictator. Now, in the Roman system, a dictator was supposed to be a temporary office, 6 months at most, reserved for emergencies. Caesar, however, stretches that idea like a baker kneading dough. His temporary powers become renewable, his authority unchecked. He is careful not to call himself King. Romans loathe monarchy ever since they kicked out their last King Tarquin the Proud centuries before, but everyone can see which way the wind is blowing. To the people, Caesar appears almost divine. He orders massive celebrations, parades through the city in triumphs, displaying spoils of war, captured enemies, and even exotic animals from distant lands. Imagine elephants lumbering down Roman streets, their handlers struggling to keep them steady, as awestruck citizens cheer. One quirky tidbit in one of these triumphs: Caesar had paintings of his victories carried alongside the parades, so even battles fought hundreds of miles away could be watched by Romans. In a way, he pioneered the ancient version of live streaming his achievements. The crowd adores him, but senators grit their teeth. For them, Caesar's dominance feels suffocating. He fills the Senate with his supporters, expands its membership to dilute old aristocratic families, and passes reforms without hesitation. He cancels debts, redistributes land to veterans, and reorganizes the chaotic Roman calendar into the system we still use today, the Julian calendar. Yes, every time you look at July named after him, you're casually nodding to Caesar's ego. Historians still argue whether Caesar's reforms were genuine attempts at improving Rome or cynical maneuvers to tighten his grip on power. Some see a visionary who streamlined governance. Others see a clever showman, giving away bread while quietly dismantling the Republic. The truth, as usual, likely lies somewhere between. In the Forum, Caesar sets up statues of himself among the gods, a move that unsettles even his allies. He sits on a gilded chair at public events, wears the laurel crown constantly, and accepts honors with suspicious enthusiasm. Senators mutter, "This looks an awful lot like a monarchy." Yet Caesar also demonstrates cunning generosity. Instead of slaughtering defeated senators, he pardons them, offering clemency again and again. Enemies who once marched against him are invited back to Rome, restored to office, sometimes even promoted. He believes mercy is stronger than terror, but in Rome, where revenge is the traditional language of politics, his forgiveness feels alien. To his enemies, clemency is not kindness, it's humiliation, a constant reminder that they owe their lives to his favor. A quirky cultural note. When Caesar first returned from battle, a law was passed declaring him sacrosanct, essentially untouchable. Statues of him were crowned with wreaths and sacrifices made in his honor. Yet in the same breath, jokes circulated about his thinning hair. Romans, irreverent as ever, whispered that Caesar would conquer the known world, but could not conquer his baldness. To hide it, famously pulled his hair forward and wore the laurel crown as often as possible. Baldness may be natural, but in Rome image was everything. Amid the triumphs and reforms, tension simmers. Some senators, even those pardoned, whisper in marble halls about restoring the Republic. They see themselves not as rebels, but as defenders of Rome's traditions. Caesar's power is vast, his popularity undeniable, but in the Senate's shadowy corners, the word tyrant begins to circulate. And so, while Caesar basks in glory, cracks form beneath his feet. He is dictator, reformer, spectacle master, and benefactor, but his mercy sows resentment and his pride fans suspicion. For now he shines like the sun over Rome. Yet like all suns, the higher he rises, the darker the shadows he casts. After his triumphs in Rome, Caesar sets his gaze eastward toward Egypt, a land steeped in luxury and intrigue. Egypt is vital, its grain ships feed Rome, and its throne is contested between young Ptolemy IX and his sister Cleopatra VII. The quarrel between them offers Caesar both opportunity and temptation, and history will remember this chapter less for politics than for romance. When Caesar arrives in Alexandria in 48 BCE, the city dazzles him. Marble palaces, wide boulevards, the lighthouse of Pharos piercing the sky, and the Library of Alexandria. Imagine walking through a city that feels like a jewel box, filled with the treasures of every civilization. Caesar, the seasoned conqueror, suddenly seems like a tourist gawking at monuments. But beneath the glitter, Egypt seethes with civil war. Cleopatra, exiled from the city, famously arranges to meet him in secret. Ancient writers spin the tale that she had herself smuggled into his quarters, rolled inside a carpet, or perhaps a laundry sack, depending on the source. Picture Caesar's face as servants unroll the bundle, and out tumbles Cleopatra, young, brilliant, and absolutely determined to reclaim her throne. Whether or not it really happened this way, the image is irresistible, the most powerful man in the world confronted by a queen who knows how to make an entrance. Their alliance is swift. Cleopatra needs Caesar's legions to secure her crown. Caesar sees in her both political advantage and personal allure. Historians still argue whether their relationship was passion or pragmatism. Was Cleopatra truly irresistible, or did Caesar simply recognize that aligning with Egypt's queen would make him master of Rome's grain supply? Whatever the truth, the partnership reshapes both Rome and Egypt. One quirky tidbit: Caesar, though nearly 50, takes to sailing down the Nile, with Cleopatra touring temples and feasting on barges draped in silks. Roman gossipers back home mock him, saying he is acting more like a tourist than a conqueror. Some even claim he tried to measure the Nile's source, a task so difficult that even modern explorers struggled centuries later. Perhaps Caesar just wanted an excuse to stay in Cleopatra's company. The Alexandrian War follows. Ptolemy's supporters resist, leading to brutal street fighting. Caesar, though outnumbered, uses cunning and engineering to hold the royal quarter. At one point, the Great Library itself may have partially burned during the clashes, though historians still argue whether Caesar's siege was truly responsible, or if the fire consumed only nearby warehouses. Either way, later generations blame Caesar for one of history's greatest cultural losses, as if he tossed an entire civilization's bookshelf into the flames. In the end, Ptolemy is defeated, drowned in the Nile, according to accounts, and Cleopatra is restored to power, now ruling with her younger brother Ptolemy XIV, in name only. In reality, she and Caesar dominate Egypt together. She even bears him a son, Caesarion, though Rome reacts with scandal. A Roman general fathering a child with a foreign queen. For conservatives in the Senate, it's proof that Caesar's ambitions stretch beyond Rome toward kingship and dynasties. Yet Caesar departs Egypt stronger than ever. He leaves Cleopatra enthroned sails back to Rome with fresh wealth and carries stories of exotic feasts, golden palaces, and a queen whose wit and beauty captivated him. To the Roman people, it adds another layer to his legend, not only conqueror of Gaul and Pompeii, but now consort of the goddess-like Cleopatra. Still, his romance with Egypt feeds suspicion in Rome. Senators grumble that he is acting less like a servant of the Republic and more like a monarch collecting crowns. They laugh behind closed doors, but their laughter is edged with fear. For now, Caesar enjoys both love and victory, but the whispers of betrayal begin to grow louder, returning to Rome after Egypt. Caesar makes sure his homecoming is nothing short of spectacular. He doesn't just enter the city, he transforms it into a stage. Triumph after triumph is held, each one a theatrical display of his victories. Picture the streets draped in garlands, incense curling through the air, crowds press shoulder to shoulder to glimpse the man who has reshaped the Republic. He rides in a chariot gilded with gold, wearing a purple toga and laurel crown, while behind him march prisoners from Gaul, Africa, and Asia. Strange animals, lions, giraffes, even a rhinoceros, are paraded for astonished Romans who have never seen such creatures. Spoils of war glisten on carts, glittering treasures from conquered lands. One quirky tidbit: during one triumph, Caesar staged a mock naval battle by flooding an arena, letting ships clash before the gawking audience. Imagine attending a sporting event where the halftime show is an actual sea war. The people are dazzled. They throw flowers, cheer his name, and chant songs that tease him about his affairs, including his rumoured liaisons with noblewomen. Caesar takes it all with a smile, knowing that Roman soldiers and citizens alike express loyalty through jokes as much as through praise. The Senate, however, watches with unease. These triumphs feel less like republican honours and more like royal coronations. Historians still argue whether Caesar's spectacles were pure propaganda or genuine generosity to the Roman people. Were they sincere acts of celebration or carefully calculated performances to cement his power? Either way, the result is the same. The citizens adore him, while the aristocrats feel increasingly suffocated. Alongside the parades, Caesar hosts massive feasts. Banquets are laid out for tens of thousands, with roasted meats, bread, and wine handed freely to the crowd. Gladiatorial games, theatrical performances, and athletic contests fill the calendar. At one point, he even promises every citizen a monetary gift paid directly from the immense spoils of Gaul. It's a political masterstroke. He turns conquest into cash for the people, binding their loyalty with both spectacle and substance. But the extravagance carries an edge. Behind the laughter and cheers, senators whisper that Caesar is bribing the masses with bread and circuses drowning out the Republic's traditions. His golden chair in the Senate, his constant laurel crown to disguise baldness, his statues placed among those of the gods, all signal a man who wants more than mere dictatorship. A quirky cultural detail: when one statue of Caesar was crowned with a diadem, a king's symbol, it was quickly removed by angry citizens. Romans despised the idea of monarchy. The memory of Tarquin the Proud still haunted them, and they swore never to bow to a king again. Caesar, ever clever, laughs off the incident, claiming he never sought such a crown. Yet suspicions linger. As the triumphs fade, Rome remains restless. Caesar's popularity with the people is unmatched, but senators feel like prisoners in their own chamber, forced to applaud a man they secretly fear. Some whisper that the Republic has already died, replaced by a monarchy in all but name. Caesar, basking in the glow of parades and games, ignores the whispers. He believes his clemency and generosity will win even his enemies. But history has shown time and again in Rome Generosity often breeds resentment, and mercy can sharpen daggers. Beneath the glitter of parades and games, Caesar begins to reshape Rome itself. He is not content with triumphs alone. He wants to leave his fingerprints on every corner of Roman life. His reforms are sweeping, ambitious, and at times unsettling to the Senate. To the common people, however, they feel like the dawn of a new age. One of his most enduring changes is the calendar. The old Roman system, manipulated by priests for political advantage, had drifted badly off course. Months no longer aligned with the seasons. Festivals fell in chaos. Caesar consults astronomers, most notably Sosigenes of Alexandria, and institutes the Julian calendar. With its leap years and solar alignment, it becomes so stable that we still use a version of it today. Every time you flip a calendar page or mark a leap year, you're echoing Caesar's reform. July itself is named for him, an eternal stamp of ego and legacy. Beyond time itself, Caesar reorganizes land distribution. Veterans who had fought with him in Gaul receive fertile plots securing their loyalty and easing Rome's overcrowding. Grain distribution is streamlined, debt laws are restructured, and public works projects spring up, temples, basilicas, and the Grand Forum Julium. He commissions roads and colonies across the empire, weaving Rome more tightly together. To ordinary citizens, he looks like a benefactor, a man restoring dignity to their lives. But with each decree, senators grind their teeth. His expansion of citizenship to conquered peoples dilutes the power of old aristocratic families. His swelling of the Senate with loyal supporters turns the chamber into a stage play, more audience than opposition. His reforms are practical, but they also concentrate power in his hands. One quirky tidbit: Caesar, ever the multitasker, once dictated letters to 4 secretaries, at the same time pacing while words spilled in every direction. He prided himself on speed both in speech and in action. His reforms seemed to tumble out of him in a torrent, leaving allies dizzy and enemies alarmed. Historians still argue whether Caesar genuinely sought to heal Rome's wounds, or whether he used reforms as a facade to crown himself monarch in all but name. Was he a visionary statesman or a master manipulator? The answer likely depends on which senator you asked as they sat in their marble seats, watching their power dissolve. Caesar also redefines clemency as policy. Enemies who once stood against him, senators who plotted with Pompey, generals who raised arms, are pardoned and restored. It is a shocking break from Roman tradition, where victory usually meant slaughter. Caesar believes mercy will inspire loyalty. Instead, it breeds quiet resentment. Each pardon feels less like kindness and more like a leash binding proud aristocrats to a man they cannot openly oppose. And then there are whispers of monarchy. At public ceremonies, he accepts honors that edge uncomfortably close to royal. He is declared dictator for 10 years, then dictator for life. Statues depict him in divine poses. He even coins money with his own portrait, an unprecedented move that screams kingship in a city sworn never to tolerate it. Romans murmur uneasily. Bread and circuses can charm, but the memory of tyranny lingers. To the people, Caesar is a hero. To the Senate, he is a shadow blotting out the Republic. The tension deepens with each decree, each festival, each new honor. For now, Caesar continues to govern with energy and confidence, but the daggers of suspicion sharpen quietly in the dark. Rome hums with unease. Caesar, dictator for life, rules with a confidence that unsettles even his allies. His reforms have reshaped daily life, his games dazzled the crowds, and his face now gleams from coins that pass through every market stall. Yet the question that gnaws at the city is this: will he go further? Will Julius Caesar try to make himself king? Romans despise monarchy. Their ancestors had overthrown kings centuries earlier, and the very word rex is poisonous in political speech. But Caesar's behavior feeds suspicion. He wears the laurel crown constantly, not just to hide his thinning hair, but also to mark himself as perpetually victorious. He accepts honors without hesitation, sits on a gilded chair like a monarch, and fills the calendar with festivals in his name. The tension reaches its peak at the Lupercalia festival in 44 BCE. It is a raucous ancient celebration of fertility, with young men running half-naked through the streets, striking bystanders playfully with strips of goat hide. Amid the revelry, Mark Antony Caesar's loyal ally steps forward and offers him a diadem, a king's crown. The crowd gasps. Here is the moment Rome has dreaded. Will Caesar take it? He refuses. The crowd cheers. Antony presses him again, raising the crown high. Caesar refuses once more, dramatically pushing it aside. The people roar their approval. Yet the damage is done. Some believe he refused only to test the waters to see how the people would react. Others believe the entire scene was staged theatre, meant to show Caesar as humble, while planting the idea of kingship in their minds. Historians still argue whether Caesar truly sought the crown that day, or whether Antony acted on his own. The ambiguity only fuels paranoia. One quirky tidbit ancient accounts say Caesar later sent the diadem to the temple of Jupiter, claiming he wanted no part of it. But skeptics noted that if he really despised the crown, why let Antony wave it around at all? It's like loudly refusing dessert, then making sure everyone sees you send the leftover cake to the gods. Meanwhile, rumors swirl that Caesar plans to move the capital of the empire to Alexandria or Troy. Whether true or not, these whispers terrify senators. The idea that Rome itself might be abandoned for a foreign city strikes them as betrayal of everything their ancestors built. They picture Caesar enthroned in Egypt with Cleopatra founding a dynasty, leaving the Republic to crumble. For ordinary Romans, though Caesar is still a hero, he provides bread games, land, and stability. He pardons enemies, spares lives, and radiates confidence. To them, he is the man who ended civil war. But to the senators, every act of clemency feels like chains tightening. Every festival in his honor feels like monarchy reborn. Rome is divided not by walls or rivers, but by perception. To some, Caesar is savior. To others, a tyrant in waiting. And as the Ides of March approach, the Senate's whispers sharpen into plans. The Republic has lived too long to kneel quietly to a crown. At least, that is what Caesar's enemies tell themselves as they polish their daggers in secret. Behind the glittering facades of temples and forums, a different Rome takes shape, one of hushed voices, careful glances, and whispered promises in dimly lit corridors. The Senate has always been fractious, a nest of rivalries, but now a common anxiety binds its members. Caesar's power has grown beyond precedent, beyond law, beyond comfort. His mercy meant as olive branches hangs over them like shackles. Every pardon reminds them of their own submission. Every festival a reminder that Rome's traditions are being bent around the will of one man. The Senate chamber itself becomes a place of unease. When Caesar enters, senators rise reluctantly, not out of genuine respect, but because not to rise is to invite suspicion. He sits in his gilded chair receiving petitions like a monarch while their voices falter. They begin to feel like actors in a play he wrote props in his carefully staged republic. One quirky tidbit. At one point, Caesar is offered the title of Parens Patriae, Father of the Fatherland. On the surface, it's a flattering honor. But many senators gag on the phrase, whispering that the Republic is no child, and Caesar is no father. To them, the title feels less like a compliment and more like a custody battle they're losing. Historians still argue whether Caesar truly planned to dissolve the Republic, or if he believed he could coexist with it, reshaping traditions rather than erasing them. Some suggest he intended to create a hybrid state where his authority balanced with Senate rituals. Others insist he was laying the groundwork for monarchy in everything but name. Whatever his intent, perception is what matters, and perception now brands him as a tyrant. The Senate's whispers gather into a single idea: liberation through assassination. It is not born of a single mind, but of many frustrations intertwining. Cassius Longinus, a seasoned general embittered by Caesar's dominance, begins to recruit allies. He is sharp-tongued, persuasive, and utterly convinced that Rome cannot breathe until Caesar is gone. Yet Cassius alone cannot sway the Senate. He needs a figure whose name carries moral weight, a man whose participation would make the plot look like justice rather than murder. That man is Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus descended from the legendary founder of the Republic, who expelled its last king, is almost a symbol in human form. To kill Caesar with Brutus at their side would be to wrap the deed in the flag of Roman liberty. Brutus is torn. He owes much to Caesar, who pardoned him after Pompey's defeat and even promoted him. They share a personal bond. Some even whisper that Brutus might secretly be Caesar's illegitimate son, though the rumor is almost certainly gossip sharpened by politics. Still, the connection makes betrayal all the more poignant. The conspirators frame their cause not as murder, but as restoration. They tell themselves they are not striking a man, but saving the Republic. We are not assassins. Cassius insists we are liberators. It is a convenient fiction, but a powerful one. One by one, senators are drawn into the web, their fear of Caesar outweighing gratitude or loyalty. Meetings are held in secrecy, often under the guise of social dinners. Daggers are hidden beneath cloaks, plans sketched in whispers. The chosen day will be symbolic a session of the Senate, where Caesar will arrive unguarded, confident in the clemency he has always shown. And so, while the city outside bustles with markets, chariot races, and gossip of Cleopatra's child, within the marbled walls of power daggers sharpen. The Republic's fate now balances on secrecy, timing, and the willingness of men to betray the most powerful figure Rome has ever known. The conspiracy gathers weight like a snowball rolling down the Capitoline hill. Cassius is the engine, relentless and sharp, but it is Brutus who gives the plot its moral cloak. Without him, it would look like jealousy. With him, it looks like patriotism. Senators flock to the cause in twos and threes, men who once bowed low before Caesar, now swearing in hushed voices to plunge their daggers into his flesh. Brutus is the most conflicted. His heart pulls him in two directions: gratitude to Caesar, who pardoned and honored him, and loyalty to the Republic, whose very founding was tied to his family name. His ancestor Lucius Junius Brutus expelled Rome's last king, swearing that no monarch would ever rule again. To betray Caesar is to betray a benefactor. To spare him is to betray his lineage. One quirky tidbit: some later writers claim that Brutus decorated his home with statues of his ancestor, glaring reminders that the Brutus name was synonymous with resistance to tyranny. Imagine eating breakfast under the gaze of a stone forefather silently judging your loyalty to Rome. Not exactly relaxing. Historians still argue whether Brutus joined out of genuine conviction or because Cassius and others pressured him with flattery and guilt. Some accounts suggest Cassius even forged letters supposedly from Roman citizens urging Brutus to save the Republic. Whether tricked or persuaded, Brutus eventually yields. His inclusion makes the conspiracy seem less like murderers scheming and more like guardians of liberty assembling. The plan takes shape. They will strike during a Senate session When Caesar arrives without his bodyguards, Caesar's own clemency makes him vulnerable. He believes his enemies tamed by pardon. The conspirators see this mercy as arrogance, a flaw that will open his ribs to their blades. Their circle swells to more than 60 senators, an unsteady alliance, for too many voices make for leaky secrets. Yet fear keeps them silent. Each man knows that if the plot is discovered, they will be crushed beneath Caesar's wrath. Meetings are tense, filled with arguments over details. Should they kill Antony too, to prevent him from rallying Caesar's followers? Cassius insists yes, Brutus insists no. Antony, he argues, is a reveler, no threat without Caesar's genius to guide him. Sparing Antony, Brutus claims, will prove they act as liberators, not butchers. It is a fatal miscalculation, though none can see it yet. One night Cassius gathers the conspirators beneath a portico lit by flickering torches. He speaks of freedom, of the Republic's ancient dignity, of their duty to act. His words fall like hammer blows, each one driving them closer to betrayal. When he finishes, daggers are drawn, not for blood, yet but for oaths. They swear upon steel, the cold blades glinting in torchlight, binding themselves to a deed that will forever echo in history. Brutus, still heavy-hearted, finally declares his commitment. His voice trembles, but his resolve hardens. The others look to him, and in his presence their guilt turns into righteousness. If Brutus is with them, then surely they are not conspirators but saviors. Meanwhile, Caesar goes about his days unaware, or perhaps half aware. He receives honors, dictates reforms, and dismisses warnings. His confidence blinds him, or perhaps he simply believes no Roman would dare. After all, he has forgiven them, enriched them, even shared triumphs with them. He trusts too easily in the gratitude of men who in truth choke on it like poison. And so, on the eve of the Ides of March, the conspirators sharpen their blades, rehearse their courage, and steady their hands. In their minds, they do not see murder but salvation. Tomorrow, they tell themselves, Rome will be free again. Morning breaks on March 15th, 44. BCE, the Ides of March. Rome wakes under a hazy sky, the streets still damp from a night of rain. Merchants set up stalls, children chase each other in the alleys, and senators wrap their togas a little tighter as they head toward Pompey's theatre, where the Senate will meet. To the common eye, it is an ordinary day, but beneath the marble columns, history sharpens its knives. Caesar himself stirs in a troubled mood. Ancient accounts tell us his wife Calpurnia spent the night tossing and turning, haunted by nightmares. She dreams of Caesar's statue gushing blood, of Romans washing their hands in it, laughing as they do. In the pale morning light, she begs him not to go. The omens are bad, she pleads, and in Rome, omens matter. A sacrificed animal reveals no heart, a sign considered catastrophic. Even the soothsayer Spurinna warns him bluntly, beware the Ides of March. Caesar wavers. He is not immune to superstition, but he also despises appearing weak. To stay home would look like fear, and fear is the last cent a ruler can afford to give off. At first, he agrees to remain, but then Decimus Brutus, ironically, one of the conspirators, arrives at his house. With soothing words, he convinces Caesar to dismiss Calpurnia's fears. The Senate waits to honor you, Decimus urges. What will they think if you hide indoors like a sick man? Flattery does. What omens cannot it pull Caesar out the door? One quirky tidbit. Plutarch says Caesar, on his way to the Senate, passed the soothsayer who had warned him. Smiling, Caesar teased, "The Ides of March have come." The soothsayer replied, "Aye, Caesar, but not gone." Chilling words like thunder rumbling before the storm. Historians still argue whether Caesar suspected danger that morning. Did he truly believe in the loyalty of the senators, Or did pride blind him to their daggers? Some suggest he sensed treachery, but thought his clemency shielded him. Others argue he went knowingly embracing fate like an actor, walking on stage for his final scene. As he approaches Pompey's theatre, the conspirators are already inside their daggers concealed beneath flowing togas. They pace, whisper sweat, and rehearse the moment. Brutus is pale Cassius restless, the others steeling themselves for violence cloaked as liberation. Outside citizens press around Caesar asking petitions, cheering his presence. He acknowledges them with practiced grace, but his pace quickens toward the chamber. The Senate hall looms, columns rising like solemn sentinels. Inside, shadows gather in corners, and the air feels heavy with expectation. Each step Caesar takes echoes against marble a drumbeat toward destiny. Calpurnia's pleas, the soothsayer's warning, the sacrificial omens all trail behind him like whispers carried on the wind. But Julius Caesar, conqueror of Gaul, master of Rome, does not turn back. The stage is set. The daggers are drawn, though still hidden. The Republic holds its breath. In moments, the world will shudder and Rome will never be the same. The chamber inside Pompey's theatre is cool and dim, its marble columns casting long shadows across the floor. Senators shuffle into their seats, voices low, eyes darting toward the entrance. Beneath their white togas, many conceal short daggers, the metal cold against their skin. They shift uncomfortably, rehearsing in their minds the moment that is about to unfold. Then comes the sound of footsteps. Julius Caesar enters his purple-trimmed toga, trailing the laurel crown fixed upon his thinning hair. He carries himself with the calm assurance of a man who has stared down armies and toppled empires. The senators rise as custom demands. Some bow deeply, though their hearts beat like drums of war. Petitions are thrust toward him as he takes his seat. One senator presses close Metellus Cimber, pleading for his brother's recall from exile. Caesar waves him off, annoyed. Metellus presses harder, clutching Caesar's toga. Caesar, his temper flickering, declares, "This is violence. It is the signal." Suddenly, Casca strikes from behind his dagger, glancing awkwardly across Caesar's shoulder. Startled, Caesar whirls, seizing Casca's arm, shouting, "Villain, what do you?" But the others surge forward. Steel flashes, marble echoes with the scrape of sandals, and the chamber erupts into chaos. One quirky tidbit, some accounts say Caesar cried out in Latin, "Why, this is violence," while others preserve his Greek exclamation to Casca, "You brute." Either way, his first reaction was disbelief, not fear but outrage, as though stunned that senators would dare lift daggers in the sacred chamber. Daggers rain down. Cassius plunges his blade, then Cinna, then Decimus Brutus. One by one, the blows land. Caesar struggles, staggering, trying to fend them off, but the tide is unstoppable. Historians still argue over how many wounds he suffered. Plutarch says 23, but it is not the number of stabs that kills him, so much as the betrayal each thrust embodies. And then comes Marcus Junius Brutus. The bond between them is tangled, ally-protégé, perhaps even rumoured son. Caesar sees him approach, dagger raised. Ancient tradition preserves his last words, et tu brute. Though some argue, he said nothing at all, only covering his head with his toga in silent despair. Still, the phrase has endured as the ultimate cry of betrayal. You too, Brutus, one quirky anecdote. Caesar, before collapsing, is said to have pulled his toga over his head so that he would not fall in disgrace exposing his body. Even in death, dignity mattered. Romans believed the way one died could be as significant as the way one lived. At last, weakened by blood loss, he collapses at the base of Pompey's statue. The irony is sharp. Caesar dies beneath the likeness of Pompey, his old ally turned rival. The marble now runs red, as though Rome itself bleeds. Historians still argue about Brutus's role. Was he the reluctant patriot compelled by duty, or a willing assassin cloaking ambition in the name of liberty? The truth lies blurred in the clash of motives, but the image is unforgettable. Caesar, the man who conquered Gaul, who crossed the Rubicon, who bent the world to his will, cut down not by foreign enemies, but by his own Senate. Silence falls after the storm of daggers. The senators stand panting, their togas spattered blades dripping. Around them lies not just the body of Caesar, but the corpse of the republic they claim to save. Outside, the people wait unaware that within these marble walls, Rome's fate has been sealed. Rome holds its breath. The conspirators huddle on the Capitoline Hill, expecting the people to greet them as liberators. Instead, the city simmers in confusion. Citizens wander the streets, whispering, grieving, and above all, waiting to see what will happen next. It is not liberty that fills their minds, but loss. Into this uncertainty steps Mark Antony. At first, he plays a cautious game. He shakes hands with the conspirators, negotiates with them, even pretends to understand their motives. He knows that striking too soon could turn the Senate fully against him. But beneath his calm surface, his anger smoulders. He has been Caesar's right hand spared by Brutus's insistence, and now he seethes with the opportunity their mercy has gifted him. Caesar's funeral becomes the turning point. Antony insists on speaking, and though the conspirators hesitate, Brutus agrees. He trusts that Antony, bound by solemn oath, will not incite the people. Trust, once again, proves fatal. The day of the funeral, Caesar's body is laid out in the forum on a bier, his toga torn, his wounds exposed for all to see. The crowd is massive, pressing close, murmuring prayers, curses, and sobs. Rome's air is heavy with grief and the scent of incense. Antony steps forward, clad in black, and begins with quiet dignity. Friends, Romans, countrymen. Well, perhaps not exactly in Shakespeare's words, but the essence is there. He praises the conspirators, calling them honorable men. He does not attack them outright. Instead, he builds his case like a master craftsman, brick by brick, irony dripping from every repetition of honorable. Then he shifts. He unveils Caesar's will, carefully saved, in which Caesar leaves gifts to the people, money parks, and benefits for every citizen of Rome. Gasps ripple through the crowd. The man they called tyrant thought of them as heirs. The conspirators who murdered him in the name of liberty now seem greedy, small, and cruel. And then Antony delivers the blow. He holds aloft Caesar's toga, slashed and stained with blood. He points to each hole, naming the senator whose dagger made it. This was Brutus's wound, he says, and the crowd groans, for Brutus was loved. Antony lifts the garment higher, the crimson cloth fluttering like a banner of grief. Finally, unable to resist, he pulls back the shroud and reveals Caesar's body itself. The wounds roar, the face still. The crowd erupts. Cries of anguish turn into roars of fury. They surge forward, carrying Caesar's bier through the streets, piling benches, cloaks, and torches into a massive pyre. Flames leap skyward as the people chant to revenge one quirky tidbit. Some accounts claim the mob, frenzied by Antony's words, tore apart the houses of the conspirators, smashing furniture and hurling debris into the fire. Even wax effigies of Caesar, showing his 23 wounds, were paraded through the streets, inflaming emotions further. It was less a funeral and more a revolution. Historians still argue whether Antony carefully planned every gesture or whether he was carried away by the crowd's emotion. Either way, his speech transforms the murder from liberation into martyrdom. The conspirators, once hopeful of being hailed as saviors, now find themselves hunted as villains. The republic they claim to save is crumbling faster than ever. Caesar is dead, but his ghost haunts every street, every forum, every whisper in the city. And from the ashes of his pyre a new struggle begins, one that will not end until Rome itself is remade into an empire. The flames of Caesar's pyre still smoulder in the forum, casting smoke into the Roman sky for days. Citizens pass by to lay flowers, whisper prayers, and touch the ashes, as though reaching for a fragment of the man they adored. In the streets, talk of liberty fades. Talk of vengeance grows. The conspirators who had imagined themselves bathed in glory now cower in fear, their names cursed, their homes attacked. Mark Antony seizes the moment. He portrays himself as Caesar's avenger, raising the banner of loyalty to the fallen dictator. He rallies Caesar's veterans, stoking their grief into fury. Yet Antony is not alone. From the east arrives Gaius Octavius, better known as Octavian, Caesar's great-nephew, an adopted son. He is young, barely 19, thin and untested. Many dismiss him. But Octavian has Caesar's name, Caesar's inheritance, and a burning determination to prove himself. Rome soon trembles with a new power struggle. Antony, bold and seasoned, believes he can control the boy. Octavian, quiet but calculating, begins to outmaneuver him, winning loyalty from legions and senators alike. Lepidus, another of Caesar's loyalists, joins them, and together they form the Second Triumvirate. The Republic, already gasping, now suffocates under a new regime of three men who wield power with ruthless efficiency. One quirky tidbit: the triumvirs didn't just seize power politically, they published prescription lists naming enemies of the state to be executed. Families scrambled in terror. Even Cicero, Rome's greatest orator, fell victim, hunted down and killed, his hands and head displayed in the forum. Cicero had once mocked Antony's drinking. Now Antony took revenge in the most gruesome way. Rome was learning that Caesar's death had not restored gentler politics, but unleashed darker ones. Historians still argue what Caesar's assassination truly achieved. Did it preserve the Republic for a few years, or did it doom it more quickly? By killing one man, the conspirators hoped to save Rome. Instead, they shattered it. Civil wars ignited, generals marched legions across provinces, and alliances fractured. In the end, Octavian emerged as Augustus, Rome's first emperor, cementing the monarchy the conspirators feared most. And Caesar himself, his legacy lived on in ways the assassins could never have imagined. His name became a title: Caesar, then Kaiser, then Tsar, echoing through centuries. His calendar ordered the world's time. His writings shaped Latin prose. His story became a warning and a legend, a man too great to be contained by a republic, too ambitious to be spared by rivals. One quirky anecdote says that when Octavian first took power, people joked that Caesar, even in death, had fathered Rome's future. For the Republic had not been reborn, it had given birth to empire, and so the betrayal that shook Rome did not end with liberty restored. It ended with daggers traded for crowns, with senators silenced, with the Republic fading into memory. Caesar's ghost lingered in every marble hall, reminding Rome that ambition cannot be slain so easily, and that from the ashes of betrayal empires rise. And now, dear listener, let the noise of daggers and the roar of crowds begin to soften in your mind. Picture the smoke of Caesar's pyre drifting higher, its sharp scent fading into a cool evening breeze. The streets of Rome, once filled with shouting, are quiet now, their stones cooling after a long day beneath the sun. Lanterns flicker in scattered windows, and the city exhales at last. The tale of Caesar has been one of ambition and betrayal, of love and politics, of men who dreamed of saving a republic, yet only hastened its end. But in this moment of calm, you need not carry the weight of their daggers or the burden of their choices. Let the story rest where it belongs in marble halls and dusty scrolls, and let your own mind drift far from politics, war, and empire. Imagine yourself in a quiet Roman garden. Olive trees sway gently. A fountain splashes softly. The air is cool and perfumed with flowers. You recline on a stone bench, the stars wheeling slowly above you, just as they did for Romans long ago. But here, in this private space, there is no conspiracy, no crown, no betrayal, only the steady rhythm of your breath and the gentle peace of the night. Allow your shoulders to loosen, your hands to unclench. The story is ended, but your rest is just beginning. With every slow inhale you take in calm. With every gentle exhale you let go of the noise of history. Rest your head, slow your thoughts, and let the marble columns fade into the mist of dreams. Rome will wait for another day. For now you are safe still and drifting, sailing softly toward sleep on a tide as quiet as the Tiber beneath the moon.